the nature of trauma through a polyvagal lens over the next hour or so. And as we go through the material, you may absolutely find that it's just too much for you to pay attention, to be able to touch into some kind of sensing and feeling into your body. And this is completely adaptive and actually quite wonderful response that we have in our autonomic nervous system when being present is just too much and too overwhelming. The body mobilizes to try to deal with those overwhelming feelings. And if there's really no escape, then we will go to a shutdown kind of place. And this is what polyvagal theory really informs us about, that these ways of responding in our autonomic nervous system are highly adaptive, and they've been with us since the beginning of our time in the world and experiencing many different kinds of situations that bodies have to be able to adapt to. So as we go through the material, I really encourage you to take care of yourselves. That's really the basic message here that I want you to really take in today, that we will go slowly and that you can pause at any point, just stop the recording, and you may just not come back to it for a while. Or maybe you just need to breathe for a little bit and then bring yourself back. One of the things that, happens is we lose our capacity to really stay connected to the prefrontal cortex of our brain, the part of ourselves that can think really clearly and can really concentrate well and get a task done. That just kind of gets really challenged when we're in that kind of overwhelming state where adrenaline is pumping, or we're just shutting right down completely because it's all too much, which is really what trauma is about. And when that happens, we really lose our sense of safety because it just completely isn't safe. And so we have to work really hard at finding a place of some kind of comfort or grounding or sense of some safety inside us. And that's very challenging for lots of us, particularly if we've been through a lot of trauma in our lives already. That sense of being able to find a place in the body that feels safe is just not really very well developed. So I want you to really notice that now, even just as we begin. Are you someone who has had already a lot of trauma in your life before the war? And has it been difficult for you to find a place where you can ground inside? And I would imagine that as a therapist, you've been working on that you're aware of that in some way. And so really important to bring that to the forefront now. Maybe you're somebody who has had the real luck and privilege of having a pretty substantially safe time in the world up until more recently. And so you may find that you've got some resources inside that you can fall back to, that you can come back into yourself, in the quiet of yourself, and into your physical body. And in brief moments, be able to calm. People who have practices of prayer, meditation, or focusing practice, which I'll share with you as we move along in the material, or even things like playing the piano, creative writing, sports, moving your body. When we're in those places, we have a kind of sense of being able to settle inside a little bit and find some grounding. So we're going to be working with this today because one of the things that polyvagal theory really teaches us, this way of understanding our autonomic nervous system, the part of the body that monitors our safety and shifts us into different states of defense to be able to protect ourselves, that this place in our body is so important to connect to as psychotherapists in order to be really able to connect with our clients. So we call this co-regulation in polyvagal theory, regulating our nervous system with our clients and our families and our friends, our children, our partners, our parents, to be able to do this as much as we can, which is going to be incredibly challenged for you right now. And that's okay. We just do what we can to find a little quiet place inside that we can connect with each other. And we really work at cultivating that. And one of the things that comes across so powerfully when I listen to the news about Ukraine is the incredible sense of the word determination comes to mind and is used a lot here over the radio, in the media, how determined people are in Ukraine to really defend themselves and to protect what feels dear and safe and is home, which is such a primal need for all of us. So I'm going to pause and just notice. I'm going to take that all in. And one of the things that we also really emphasize in working with the autonomic nervous system is how important it is to feel into your body. And certainly in North America, and I think all over the world to some extent, there are certainly pockets where this is very different, but a lot of our training as psychotherapists is really oriented towards analyzing and thinking and interpreting. And all of these things are wonderful if they bring the body into that process, because we live in our bodies. And if that was ever more clear than now, I don't know when that would be, because now we're really powerfully seeing the impact of the need for grounding and safety and what happens in our bodies physiologically when we don't have that. We all can feel that response of adrenaline pumping when we become terrified. The body is speaking to us in ways that are really unconscious. Our autonomic nervous system is not a conscious decision. When we feel that flooding of energy and we bolt to run, we don't think about that, we just do it. And when the body shuts down because it's just too much, it's too overwhelming, which I'm sure all of us are experiencing now with the wars in the world and also with COVID, then bodies just shut down. They go into hibernation. It's just all too much. And we need to do that to be able to cope and to survive. And this really is what it becomes, is about survival. So let's begin. And you might want to just settle yourselves in your chair. You might want to get some paper and a pen if you want to be able to take some notes. The beauty of the recording, of course, is you can listen to it again and again, and really encourage you to go at your own pace. As we move along the material, it will become more theoretical at times. And so, you know, that might feel good for you to just kind of, sometimes it's really a sense of relief to be able to go up into our head and think about things and somewhat detach from the intensity of what's around us. And other times it's just impossible to do when we're overwhelmed. And trauma really overwhelms the system. That really is, for me, the definition of it. And when we become overwhelmed like that, it really shatters a sense of meaning in our lives, of the sort of comfort of predictability that we need as human beings. We need structure. We need all of that, and it goes out the window. It's not there now. So we have to really, you have to work at that, at developing a kind of structure and a kind of routine. I mean, even if it's a new, fragile little routine of the day, it can be something like, in the morning, pausing to connect in a little bit and saying hello to yourself inside and giving yourself some sense of love and kindness and feeling into that from your community and from us, from this community here and the Polyvagal Institute. So I'm going to do some share screen to show you. I'm just a very visual person, so I like to work with images. And I find that images really resonate with our embodiment and help us to really take in concepts of what we're learning and thinking about. So here we go. And the first one that we're going to work with is this picture of the 6 steps of focusing practice. So I came to focusing, which is somewhat similar to meditation, in the beginning of the practice of focusing, when I started working as a trauma therapist over 40 years ago now. I worked with young women who were survivors of incest and sexual abuse and physical abuse. Some of them were still in unsafe places, so they were experiencing the trauma ongoing, as you will find in your practice, of course, right now. And that really changes the nature of our work when we're working with people who are in unsafe places at the moment. And particularly if you as a therapist are in unsafe places in the moment, it's very, very, very challenging work, extremely challenging. So going slowly, and some people won't feel safe to touch into the body at all. But what we can do is work in different sort of layers of it. And I'll say more about that. So focusing comes from Eugene Gendlin's work. And in the model that I've created called the Felt Sense Polyvagal model for working with trauma and addiction, Gendlin was really one of my first teachers. Prior to that, I learned a lot from current feminist therapists in the community who were working with young women who were tortured and really understood the importance of connecting with the body and of being present with our clients in a very genuine and authentic and human way. So not to put up a lot of barriers between us and them, but to really feel into our own capacity to be present as vulnerable human beings. And at the same time, to provide some source of grounding as much as we can, as much as possible, while we're doing the work. So Gendlin discovered that people who were doing really well in psychotherapy were people who were basically essentially connected to their bodies. And so he thought, well, if people who are doing well are connected inside and integrated into their feelings and their thoughts and their physical sensations in the body and memories. Bodies carry memories. Then maybe for folks where it's really difficult to be able to connect into the body, we could teach them how to do this. And so he developed these 6 steps as a way of teaching people how to connect inside. So this is very helpful now, because if you experience in your own self, and just pause for a moment, how would it be right here and now just to begin to notice some sensation in your body? And you may find that you just don't want to go here at all. And that's completely normal if you're feeling really under threat. And so I would suggest that you just maybe pause the recording for a while. You might want to come back to it again in a while. Or you might decide that you can just listen to my voice, but not really follow along into the practice. And that's fine. That's really a very important part of understanding the nervous system. You know, your body will decide for you, and you can nudge it and encourage it to come forward a little bit more. But if it just doesn't feel safe enough, and, you know, it makes perfect sense that it wouldn't right now for you, then you just really honor the way in which your body is protecting you and understand that it is an adaptive response. So if you decide that, oh, I'm feeling okay, like I can go further with Jan here now, then we start with clearing a space, which is really a meditative practice. And this is one of really trying to bring yourself into this present moment right now and right here, where you're with me and we're imagining that we're all here together, all of us listening to the recording. And we can bring awareness right into the moment and ask ourselves in our bodies just to clear away anything that's getting in the way of that right in this moment in time. And you might be able to do that a little bit. Some people who maybe have a history of meditation practice, see if you can find that again in yourself, resurrect it, work with it some more, cultivate it, nurture it. This is the time to really work on that in your practices. It may be just too difficult to do, in which case you might practice what we call clearing a space backwards, where you would find a little spot on your body, maybe the tip of your nose or your fingers or the tips of your toes, that feels okay. And you would bring attention there and just let your mind and your body kind of hang out there. And we'll be doing a practice in a little while where we will work on this. So that's step 1. Jean Gendlin said, okay, let's work with people to help them to just clear the space inside. And then once you're able to do that, you can begin to get a sense of what's happening in my body and what wants my attention. And this is a very powerful and wonderful thing to be able to do, to find a whole felt sense of what's happening in your body. And again, realizing that you just may not want to go there now. And that's all okay. Remembering that down the road, this will really help you and your clients to find your way into the body for you and for the people that you're working with. It's really essential for all of us. If we want to heal from trauma, we have to find our way back into our bodies eventually. And so this is a way, a gentle path into the body. A lot of people, certainly in North America, and I think throughout Europe and internationally, are speaking about the felt sense. Gendlin's focusing practice, the International Focusing Institute, is international. And the felt sense really is more than sensation. The felt sense is feeling into your body and connecting with thoughts and feelings, your emotions, and how they sit in your body physically. You know, do you have a kind of a queasy stomach, or a tightness in your jaw and your whole body you may be experiencing? Or you may be experiencing kind of a flatness or a profound sadness and grief. We notice, we touch these things, but we don't fall into them. And that's really the challenge in trauma work, is to titrate that. And bodies carry memories. So that's a big part of the work that needs to be done in working with trauma. So we look for the whole felt sense of a situation, and then we try to get a handle for it, a word or an image, or maybe a gesture in the body that really captures the essence of that felt sense experience. And we resonate with that back and forth. And we ask questions about it in a very curious and compassionate way. Questions like, what does this place need? So you may find that you can touch very, very carefully into a place of anguish, for example. Step back from it and ask it, what does this place need? And when we listen quietly to the body, and we listen in partnership with another person, often the body will bring a kind of shift in that sense of just really welcoming being named, being heard, not being alone with these feelings that are inside and so deep. And then we welcome that, and we try to find a partner who can be with us, whether that's us as a therapist with our clients, or as therapists, as human beings with our friends or our partner, or even to touch into this with our children as we listen to them. And we'll talk a bit more about that later. So this is kind of the whole range in which we can work with the body. And you can see that now in particular, we have to be very, very careful about how much we go in, because we don't want to flood. So it's a process. It takes time and unfolds. Okay, so let's pause again. We're just going to make our way through the material slowly, with a really profound sense of honoring whatever you are feeling and thinking right now. It's all adaptive. It's all your body's way of protecting you. This is a quote from Steve Porges, the father of polyvagal theory. This wonderful person who's given us so much in terms of understanding trauma. And when I read this quote, I knew that I really had found a home for my way of practicing, my way of really being in the world. It just resonated so much with what I learned from the young women in the group that I was leading. If we want individuals to feel safe, we don't accuse them of doing something wrong or bad. We explain to them how their body responded, how their responses are adaptive, how we need to appreciate this adaptive feature, and how the client needs to understand that this adaptive feature is flexible and can change in different contexts. Then we can use our wonderfully creative and integrative brain to develop a narrative that treats our atypical behaviors not as bad, but as understandable in terms of adaptive functions that may often be heroic. So in my work over the years, I developed a model for working with trauma and addictions, that we will touch on here, that is very visual. And I really developed it with the help of my clients. We made it a client version of the model. This is the autonomic nervous system. So we're going to break it down and explain it. We called it 6Fs just to make it simple, as a way of being able to understand how our autonomic nervous system works. These are the different branches of the nervous system. So we're going to break it down into the main branches of the nervous system first. So at the bottom, we call this place flock. And flock is where we feel connected to each other. We feel a presence of what Steve Porges calls the social engagement system. This is the part of the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve carries so much information about our autonomic nervous system up into the brainstem. 80% of the information is afferent, it's body, it's what is actually happening to us right now. And so when we're in this flock place, this is the ventral part of the vagus nerve. It's above the diaphragm. And this part of the vagus reaches up into our heart, up through our throat and into our ear, and then across our face. And so right now, for example, as I'm looking at you and you're looking at me, hopefully, as much as we can imagine, we're socially engaging with each other. We're connecting and we're noticing, am I safe with this person? Is Jan a safe person for me to be listening to right now and to taking into my body this new information? Can I allow my body to settle a little bit into the chair and to feel my feet on the floor and to hear her voice and to hear a sense of connection? And here we are then co-regulating with each other. I'm here with you, I'm imagining you, and you're here with me. And we're creating a connection, an engagement, and we're co-regulating with each other, even if it's across the universe in a webinar. And that is pretty profound when you think about it. And the more connected we feel in this flock place, the ventral branch of the autonomic nervous system, the more we feel into a whole felt sense of an experience, the physical sensations in your body. And just notice now, is there a place in your body that can calm down a little bit and feel into something that feels okay? I'm just going to be quiet for a minute. And if this doesn't feel right for you and you don't want to do this, just ignore my instructions. Go get a glass of water or have a little walk. But if it's possible, it will help you to just feel down somewhere into your body, a place and a time that feels okay. It might be a part of your body, might be the tip of your toes that feels okay. Or it might be an experience that you had a long time ago that felt good, or even yesterday. And really noticing what that feels like physically in your body. Where do you feel that? And you might even touch your body in the place where you feel it. Lots of people feel a lot of sensation in their upper chest. And it helps us to touch ourselves here, especially during these times where a lot of us have been pretty isolated up until more recently. And so to touch into and to feel into your body and feel the physical sensation is a beautiful practice to do. So this is flock. And you're connecting to yourself, and you're connecting now, hopefully, with my voice. One of the most powerful things I think we can learn in being trauma therapists is really to connect with other people. Find a partner. Find a partner that you can share things with, your feelings, your felt sense, the deepness of what you're experiencing. Naming those things is very validating in the body and brings us into that ventral branch of the vagus above the diaphragm, where we can feel a sense of understanding and making sense of things. Even at times like this, where really in many ways we can't make sense of it. But that's life. That's the paradox that we live in. So it's a complex world. So here we are then. Then we can notice in the old model of the autonomic nervous system, the ANS, I'll call it for short, there was this branch, and then there was the flight fight branch of that sympathetic part of the nervous system that pumps adrenaline and cortisol. It's a stress response. It's mobilizing. And we know this place in our bodies. This is a very powerful part of the ANS. It just says, whoa, I got to get out of here. I've got to flight, or I'm going to fight. And you can see in the world now, it is just full of these responses of fight and flight. And when we understand that this is a defensive response, and it's an unconscious response that the body takes us to, it helps to begin to make some sense out of things. And you may notice that, this is where you are a lot of the time now. I think it's where many people in the world are now a lot of the time. And it's a very stressful place because it's not a place of healing. Flock is the place of, as Steve calls it, Steve Porges, health and growth and restoration. But when we're in fight flight, in that sympathetic branch of the nervous system, our immune system is really compromised. So anything that we can do to pause, to touch into a moment in time that brought a sense of connecting to ourselves, to the people that we love in the world, to humanity. Anything we can do to pause and bring that in a memory and a physical sensation is a practice of what we call in polyvagal theory, a neural exercise, a practice that brings us down the pathway into flock. And then if we're in that sympathetic branch and we can't mobilize, we can't get away, and we can't fight, then the body gets really tired, fatigued, and it goes into what we call fold or collapse in polyvagal language. We collapse down. And this is the branch of the nervous system that Steve Porges called the dorsal branch. And this is really the new addition to the autonomic nervous system through the polyvagal lens. So I like to think of polyvagal theory as a trauma-informed version of the autonomic nervous system. Because when Dr. Porges saw this dorsal shutdown response in premature babies. Instead of their heart rate going up when they were sick, really very sick in hospital, their heart rates dropped down. And so this made him very curious, and he went on a journey to try to figure that all out. And what he found was that this is indeed what happens when bodies are under threat, these little babies' bodies, through physical illness or through people who are experiencing a lot of trauma. Bodies will go into this kind of hibernating dorsal branch of the vagus. And it makes sense that we would shut down, and it makes sense that through the wisdom of the body, there would be a way that we can adapt when we can't escape. That does make sense, because otherwise, how could we endure the kinds of unspeakable things that you are experiencing? And those of us who do trauma work experience with our clients. So thank goodness that there is this place of fold, and this is the place of dissociation to protect us. So when you see this in yourself, in your clients, in people on the street, the vacant eyes of the dorsal vagus, the numbing, the depression, this is all nature's way of closing in and shutting down to protect. Now, there is a problem with this that we know, because what happens over time is that when situations do shift and change and become less scary and less unsafe over time, then the autonomic nervous system gets stuck in this trauma loop and finds it very difficult to shift out of it. And so people get triggered and they fall back into fight, flight, and fold without being able to find enough social engagement and flock. Bodies just go back into this kind of trauma feedback loop in the brain. And that becomes part of our work as trauma therapists, is to help people to shift out of those pathways, those trauma feedback loops. But right now, where you are in the world, it's happening now. And this is incredibly challenging. So those are the three main branches, with the dorsal branch being the newest one that Steve Porges named. It's the oldest branch of the nervous system in terms of how our bodies developed over time. Okay, and then these are the blended states that we've identified so far. As we work with bodies, with the nervous system, we're finding that more and more kind of blendings of different branches are part of how we function in the body. You know, bodies are alive, they move around. And so one of the ones that we've identified, we called fun or fired up. And that's a blending of this flock place of safety and the sympathetic place of flight, fight. And a good way of explaining that is like if you hear, or you used to hear children playing, and sometimes still children are playing in the midst of whatever is happening around, which is really incredibly protective and resourceful and amazing that we see this in little children. You hear this kind of fun that's happening, and then when something happens that's really scary, they quickly go into the sympathetic flight, fight place. And you'll see the shift. They lose the sense of safety. There isn't playfulness or fun anymore. They're in danger. And so that fun, fired up place is a blended state. Fired up is like the the state in which we are feeling deep passion about something. And we have some anger inside, but it's grounded. It's not a full-on raging. It's a grounded place because there's enough of that ventral energy in there to keep us with feet on the floor and a calm enough place in the body. And then on the other side, you see flow. So this is a blending of that ventral place and the dorsal. The dorsal vagus is that state where we're still and immobilized. And when the body feels safe enough, that dorsal state is just following along, keeping us company, regulating us. And there is this kind of flow blended that happens inside. And this is where meditation practice is, where focusing practice is, where things slow down. And we can pause inside and feel into a place that can nourish us and nurture us. And when we can do that, then we have something available to ourselves and with other people. And then up on the top is fixate freeze. And this is a blending of flight, fight, and the dorsal shutdown. And this is the place where addictions often occur. This is a lot of the work that I've been doing over the years, was to try to understand addictions because I saw them as so prevalent in working with trauma, that people would get into self-harming behaviors that became addictive because they were so effective. They worked so well at being able to help people to shift from a really uncomfortable sympathetic flight fight place to a shutting down numbing place that would bring relief, or vice versa. In shutting down and numbing too much, people can feel almost dead. And in fact, with a real shutdown response, it is life-threatening. So being able to activate some kind of a behavior that jolts the body back into the sympathetic, mobilizing state is very helpful when you don't have enough of that ventral grounded energy to be activating the ventral vagus nerve to live in a more grounded way. So you can see how addictions are absolutely integrated into trauma responses. In polyvagal terms, they're state regulation strategies that shift us back and forth. And they're usually, in my experience, they're very often present in trauma because they're effective. They work really well. So here's our whole model again together. I'm just seeing all of those different states. And what I do when I'm working with clients or in myself, in my own practice with myself, I orient myself and my clients to the model. I ask the question, where am I right now in my nervous system? Or you can ask your clients where they are. And we're going to do a practice around this in a little while. So in working with the nervous system and working with families, with partners, with children, it's really helpful to bring in all that we're learning about how we adapt in life. And what I've done is to develop a practice that I call calm, that I teach to parents in terms of helping them be able to help their children and also with their partners and their whole families. So we're just going to take a look at this, and then we're going to do a practice. One of the things that's so important to learn that polyvagal theory teaches us is this concept that Steve Porges calls the intervening variable. And this is incredibly valuable when you're working in relationship with your partner, with your children, and in your own life. And then as you can teach that to your clients. And this is really important to think about in terms of what you and your people are going through right now. So we've got stimulus on one end, and then this intervening variable of the autonomic nervous system that comes between stimulus and the response. And basically the idea here is that something occurs that stimulates us. So here you are experiencing these incredibly terrifying situations that are stimulating the body. And where you go in your autonomic nervous system will color the response that you have. So, for example, if your children hear a really loud, booming noise, and they go to, in their little nervous systems, they go to flight, their response is going to be probably a lot of tears, right? They may even go to fight as a way of trying to manage all of these big feelings inside. And so their response is going to be really colored by this response in the nervous system. If your children hear a booming noise as the stimulus, and because they're overwhelmed and terrified, their little nervous system has gone to fold and shut down and moved in and collapsed, what you will see in their response will look very different. It may be a complete kind of stillness that is hard to understand. But what it shows you is a very adaptive response that is happening in their little bodies now as a way of coping. So you can see that if you're living in a situation where something occurs and you're already in fight flight, how you respond to whatever that is that occurs, somebody bumps into you or they start to give you a hard time about something. If you're already in fight mode because you're mobilizing to protect your life, you're going to respond with fight. But if something occurs as a stimulus where somebody's giving you a hard time or they bump into you on the street, and you're living in flock, a grounded state where you feel enough safety inside your own body and outside in your community, then your response may be, oh dear, this person bumped into me. That happens. It's easy to forgive. Or this person's giving me a hard time. Gee, they must be really struggling in fight flight, but I'm okay. So I can stay grounded and keep them company and even have compassion for them in their fight flight response. So we see how powerful this is, understanding how the autonomic nervous system changes the story that we tell ourselves in our response. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop sharing right now, and I'm going to come back to you. And we're going to do a practice that incorporates a lot of what we've been talking about. If you want to pause the recording for a minute, take a breath, go and get yourself a glass of water. This would be a good time to do that. Yeah. And so this practice that we're going to do comes from a grounding exercise that I created for my Felt Sense Polyvagal model. So collecting yourself, connecting into your seat, into your chair, feeling the ground underneath you. We're going to pull this all together in an experience. Now, if you feel comfortable, you can begin to lower your eyes and soften your gaze. And you might feel comfortable to close your eyes. You decide what is right for you. And you can always just stop if it feels too much. But you'll have this practice on the recording. And when there is a time that you will be able to touch in deeper to yourself, you'll have this to be able to come back to. But if now isn't the time, you just really notice that and say, oh, now is not the time. I don't want to do this. Too scary, too much. We say, okay, that's the way your body's adapting right now. That's polyvagal theory in action. And we honor that. That's okay. Okay, so quietly, just letting yourself settle into your chair. Or you might want to stand up. If your body's already in that kind of mobilizing energy state, you can stand up and you can move around while you do this practice as well. Okay. So you might want to invite your body just to take a few nourishing breaths. Just checking to see, would it be okay? Just to breathe right here and right now to allow the body to settle. And see if you can extend that exhalation breath to activate that healing place in the vagus nerve, the ventral branch. So you might breathe in for 4 and breathe out for 6. You find the right count for yourself, and I'll just be quiet for a moment. And as you extend that exhalation breath, just imagine that that ventral part of your vagus nerve, the biggest cranial nerve that comes from above the diaphragm, right up through your chest and your heart center, right up into your throat and your ear, and then around your face, and that it's just settling down inside. You might even imagine it's kind of got a golden, warm glow to it. This is a very simple and very powerful portal to grounding. extending the exhalation breath. And then being with your body from the inside. Just notice how you're holding yourself. How is your body carrying you? Are you held tight and anxious and wound up in that fight-flight place? That sympathetic branch of the nervous system? Or do you feel kind of loose and comfortable? Is it kind of relaxed in there now? Grounded? Or maybe it's really heavy and lethargic and depressed, or numb and frozen in the dorsal branch. Just orienting yourself to the model. Where am I in my ANS? And is this a familiar place for you, or does this feel new, this way of relating in your body? And would it be okay to find an experience, a moment in time that feels grounded or even calm, something from long ago, or a moment where you were holding someone, touching? It doesn't have to be perfect. Just even imagining a time in your life where it felt okay. Things are moving along and you have a sense of managing. And if it's really hard to find, could you imagine a time? What would it be like? And then notice, are you alone? Or are you with other people? And what's the story? What's happening? And notice where this place lives in your body, in your heart, your breath, your jaw, your belly, your shoulders. And then your body may begin to shift into more of a sense of grounded. Just notice. Just as we're giving it compassion and we're co-regulating in this space of nurturance, maybe there's a word or an image or a phrase or maybe a gesture in the body that really captures the quality of this experience, this moment in time that feels okay, feels grounding, feet on the floor, just right now in this moment. And when you find the word or the phrase or the image, we call this the handle in focusing. This is step 3, the handle for this felt sense of being here and now, together and okay, connected. And you might want to say that handle just to see if it resonates. It's just the right handle to find this place again when you need it. When you feel terrified, see, can you find this place? Or maybe not then, but maybe a bit later, when there's a calm. Can you find this place again? It will keep you company. And then as you begin to feel your feet on the floor, you can start to round this off inside. Just notice what that was like. How that was for you. You might want to keep a couple of notes on it. I'm going to go back to sharing screen. So how that exercise is for you is going to be really shaped by how your early experiences were in the world. And you'll notice this in your clients a lot too, as you're moving through time. So for those of us who had a very secure kind of safe nest, I like to call it, growing up in our families, with lots of ventral energy, it will be easier to find that place inside. That's a real gift to grow up that way. And it just makes life a lot easier. And for those of us who grew up with a lot of insecurity, with a lot of sympathetic energy from the folks who cared for us, they were either in a lot of anxiety or anger, or they were avoidant, whatever was going on for them that made life dysregulating for them is going to be translated into our little bodies as babies. And that will make us, our nervous systems, to be shaped by that into that kind of sympathetic response. And then for some of us, we grew up in a really terrifying environment, or you're experiencing some of that now, where the caregiver is either terrified or is terrifying. And of course, for children now growing up in a war zone, this is happening tragically a lot. And it may have happened for you too, as a therapist, that you grew up with a lot of this kind of energy. And it produces a really kind of dorsal response, often, of shutting down and dissociating, because it's just too much. It's overwhelming and terrifying. So knowing this about yourself and about your clients is extremely helpful, and about your partners and your own children, thinking about this and how it relates to polyvagal theory and the autonomic nervous system. Very, very helpful. So we go back to calm then and look at each of these different letters. And this is a practice that you can use for yourself. And you can also teach to your clients when they're working with families, with children. So we start with C, with this idea in polyvagal theory of co-regulation. How we relate to each other, how I am relating to you right now in the ventral branch of my nervous system, and inviting your nervous system to come into this state with me. And maybe it will, and maybe it won't. Maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. Maybe it's just creeping in a little bit, which is so much of the time what we do as therapists, right? We invite this energy. We invite our clients to feel the edges of this energy in us. And as they do, it gets bigger, it grows, and it expands. And it's so beautiful to see that as they really, by the end of the session, move down into such a beautiful, much more ventral kind of energy. So that's C. And you can see how crucial it is that for you, as your own instrument. We trauma therapists, we're our own instruments. We must take care of ourselves as much as possible to have compassion for ourselves and for what we're experiencing. And then A, asking your child, how do you feel? How do you feel? And then tracing their little nervous systems with the model. They love the model. It's very colorful. It's a really clear kind of depiction of what is happening inside. And you can use it with your children, pin it on the fridge, help them to remember it in their minds, help the little children that you're working with, if they're displaced, to begin to identify in their own little bodies, what's it feel like in there? And they can tell you, they know the feeling often in their tummy, unless they've shut down into dorsal, which is fine. If you see that in children, you just notice that. Ah, yeah. And then you listen to your own felt sense of what is happening in your body as you're co-regulating with this child. And if you see that they're in that shut down place, just sitting beside them, breathing with them will help them to start to co-regulate. Honoring their defensive system, that they are in that dorsal place to adapt, really honoring that in their little bodies. And then when you can, if you're in an environment that is predictable enough, maintaining those daily practices together. So we're going to talk about some of these practices as we begin to wind up. One of them is orienting to the model. So helping the people around you to understand their nervous systems and teaching this to them. Focusing is another practice. Checking down inside, how are they doing in there, if it feels safe enough. Or maybe just starting with clearing space, orienting to the room, seeing a chair, seeing a picture, finding an object, something that feels familiar and grounding. You see how children do this with carrying around, little stuffed animals, taking things from their home. It's heartbreaking. But this is a way that we all have of holding on to something that feels familiar and like home and like security and love. That's a practice, and we honor it. So we're just going to have a look at, this is the clinician model of the polyvagal theory, felt sense. It's much more complex, and I've really integrated more of the polyvagal language. Probably something you might look at down the road. We use body cards when we're working with the felt sense. And this is an example of the sympathetic nervous system body cards, the flight fight place in the body. And you can see these were made by adults, but children love to use these body cards. You can just get a piece of paper and draw a body and have them color on it. This is so powerful. To name what is happening in your body is a healing practice. And to have it witnessed by someone who cares for you is a healing, deeply healing practice, because it externalizes, it makes explicit what is implicit in the body. And when we do that, we move through the healing process of trauma. And it validates our own experience. I'm not crazy. This is what is happening inside of me. And this is where I am on that model. And it's normal and it's adaptive. And my body's taking care of me. Very healing. This is an example of a fold and collapse, numbing place inside. Very powerful. And again, when we use imagery to externalize what is going on inside, very, very healing practice. All of these are downloadable on my website at janwinhall.com. The body cards, the models. This is the way that we track what's going on in the nervous system. You can, kind of draw the pathways. These are the neural pathways. This is the trauma pathway of addiction, where people are shifting from one sympathetic state, using whatever it is that they become addictive to shift down into dorsal or back the other way. And when I show people this, particularly when they're really struggling with addiction, it really makes a lot of sense for them. They can feel the relief and the shifting in the body, in their autonomic nervous system. And this is that trauma feedback loop that we want to break. And last but not least, this is the 3-circle practice. So again, you might want to take a break at this point before you start into this. You can also download this on my website, or you can just draw 3 circles. And that inner circle is the place of behaviors that we really want to try to manage, to reduce harm around these behaviors. And this is an important, really important work when perhaps down the road, when you're not really in the thick of it, you want to help clients with addictive behaviors. Addictions are drastically on the rise, certainly here in North America, and I would imagine all over the world, because of the level of dysregulation that we're all feeling. Bodies are shifting into that trauma pathway, and addictions just work so beautifully to manage those states. So it's no surprise. So the middle circle are the defensive states, the flight, fight, and the shutting down states. And that's where we show these. I've got an example I'll show you next. And the outer circle are the ventral blended branches of the nervous system. This 3-circle practice comes from Patrick Caron's work. He did a lot of work in addiction and sex addiction. And what I did is I integrated the polyvagal theory, the autonomic nervous system, into the circles because it occurred to me that they fit so beautifully and they help us to really understand ourselves. So here's an example of that. This is somebody that you can see in their inner circle. They're working on dysregulation around food and pornography addiction and marijuana. And so they're limiting those behaviors in ways that are really quantifiable. You can really operationalize the behavior here for accountability, because accountability is so deeply important when you're working with addictions. And so this person is limiting their desserts to 2 a week. They've made a commitment not to watch pornography and not to smoke marijuana. Then the middle circle are the states that we go to as a result of triggers that activate us. So changes in COVID restrictions really activates people. Arguments with your partner, systemic issues of oppression like racism, conflicts at work, and now obviously in the world and what's happening in Ukraine, war. The war is a huge dysregulator for people. Loneliness is a part of this as well. People become displaced and lose their families. And it's happening on top of trauma that's already been there with COVID. And for a lot of folks, what's already been there in terms of childhood trauma and how they grew up intergenerationally and in their own families. So you can see ours is not an easy job. We have a really challenging job, and we really must take care of ourselves and each other. And we need to do that in connection. And that brings us to the outer circle, which are the ventral practices. What do we do in our lives to help ourselves so that we don't fall into that inner circle? So this is another way of kind of checking in with yourself to say, okay, clearly now I'm functioning in the inner circle. For those of you in Ukraine, you know, I'm in a war zone. And for those of you who may see this who are in Europe, you're close, very close to a place, a country that is really suffering. And so we're chronically in these states of dysregulation. And in some ways, all over the world, there is this global trauma because of what's happening and the severity of it, and because of COVID. So we're all dysregulated. We're all experiencing global trauma. So we need to work so hard at developing this outer circle. What can we do to protect ourselves, to build ventral energy in the body? And one of the things we know without doubt is that you need to be in connection with other people. So find a partner, somebody that you can share what is happening in your life, whoever that might be. It could be a stranger, but somebody that you can feel comfortable enough to be able to do that with. And people do this in times of horror. People find each other because we're wired to connect. This is one of the basic, most powerful notions about polyvagal theory. We heal in connection. We're born in relationship, in connection. And we need each other to stay in relationship and to heal over time. So I want to end with you. I'm going to skip this because we've gone a long ways. I did create an embodied assessment and treatment tool, which maybe down the road you'll be curious about. It's fairly complex, but it's a beautiful way of assessing what's happening in an embodied way for your clients. You can check this out on my website. You can you actually complete it in Excel, so you can use it online as clinical notes as well. And yeah, you can see it on my website at a time when you're able to really take that in. But for now, I'd like us to end with just looking at these beautiful body cards that those of us in my community called Focusing on Boredom in Toronto, Canada, have made over the years. We have a wonderful community here, and we flock together. It's been hard to do that over the last 2 years, but we still feel each other a lot online, and every once in a while we touch each other physically. But let's just close with a moment of really taking in how beautiful it really is inside us when we feel into this ventral energy in the body. And just notice where you feel this energy in your body. Maybe there's a little bit of it that starts to creep in. We're pretty resilient as human beings. It's pretty remarkable. And then you might just want to put a hand where you feel it. I feel it usually here in my upper chest. And then you might want to join me. The way that we often say goodbye online is this practice of feeling into the social engagement system. I think it was Deb Dana that did this. Deb has done such wonderful work in translating polyvagal theory for us trauma therapists. So this hand to heart, and then really feeling into that ventral energy. And you see how for pretty well everybody, there's a kind of yellow glow to it, which is interesting. And even in the worst of times, you could put your hand where you feel this energy. And we hope that you will carry the polyvagal family with you as you feel into this. And thank you so much for joining us. And please know that we're with you.